And so I offer these words by Mark Bellatini, and you can take them home and read them also. Election promises. I hear the polls are going to be open on Tuesday, all day. Good. I certainly intend to go to them. I certainly invite you to go to them and to vote. But today, I say, the polls are not just open on Tuesday. This doesn't have anything to do with early voting. I say they are open every day, every hour, even here, even now. I'm going to vote right now for the right to dream of a world where the word politics doesn't stop me in my tracks, and where the word honor still has a few good meanings left. I'm going to vote right now for the power of free people to actually be free, no matter who they are, no matter who has abandoned them, no matter who hates them. I actually am going to vote for love. I am going to vote for truthfulness as the norm, not the exception. I'm going to vote for a world that doesn't vote for killing, control, and swagger. I'm going to vote for you. I'm going to vote for me. Right now, right here, silently, but for real. So however things go on Tuesday into Wednesday, I want you to remember that there is a great deal of power in the way we decide to treat each other and those we encounter every day, not just on election day. So however powerless you may feel in this process, I don't want you to forget that power that you do have, that we do have. Our prayer this morning is by Christine Robinson. God of autumn, help us to live with the grace of falling leaves, the enthusiasm of the flaming aspens, with the serenity of the old trees, whose roots reach deep into the earth. God of autumn, help us to know that living and dying are one, that life is precious and beautiful and limited, that nothing good is ever lost. God of autumn, help us to see in the ways of nature a way for ourselves. Amen. Is by Meg Barnhouse, entitled A Time for Darkness. For some of us, she says, the light is a symbol that can represent the light of reason by which we find our way in life. We honor reason in our tradition and rebel against any faith system that demands that we put aside our need for things to make sense. For others, the light can represent the light of spirit that ebbs and flows inside us as we feel sometimes drained and dusty, and other times energetic, enthusiastic, and supple. Sometimes in our lives are spirited times, and others are dispirited times. As we contemplate the meanings of the dark times and the light times, the earth-based traditions would caution us against using the dark as a symbol for all that is negative. If we use darkness to speak about ignorance, depression, and evil, we speak as if it would be best to have no darkness at all, to have light all the time. That would be awful. There is a season for dark and a season for light. Is it possible then that there is a time to feel energetic and a time to feel drained in the rhythm of life? A time to let life and energy flow outward from you, and a time for it to flow inward. Maybe the ebb and flow of spirit is a rhythm that is good to feel. Maybe in our growing into wholeness, there is a time to feel dusty and dry, hard as iron, like the winter ground, and stony as winter water. Maybe instead of worrying and suffering over those feelings, we could settle into them, knowing that there is a time for cold and a time for warmth, a time to be energetic and a time to rest, a time to grow and a time to stay where you are, a time for the light of reason and a time for other ways of knowing. Maybe we could walk in beauty and balance more easily if we could welcome the dark time, trusting that when it reaches its full strength, things will begin their tilt back in the other direction. Nothing stays the same in the flow of things. All things seek their balance and their rhythm. The wheel will always turn. The light will always be reborn. We need not be afraid.
The summer before my freshman year of high school, we were given a summer reading list. There was a list of about 20 books, and we were to pick just 2. Not knowing anything about the books on the list, I asked my mother to select 2 for me. She's an avid reader and had read most of them. The next day I came home to find her choices on the kitchen counter. Call the Darkness Light was one of them, by Nancy Zeroulas. The story of Sabra Palfrey, a Lowell mill girl in 19th century America. Set 2 decades before the Civil War, the story follows Sabra and her sister weavers and spinners, the first generation of American women to work and live apart from their families. The other book was Chesapeake by James Michener. Chesapeake is the saga of America's Great Bay and its eastern shore, from the unspoiled world of the Native Americans to the voyages of Captain John Smith, the Revolutionary War, right up to modern times. So these are the books I found on the kitchen counter that day. Call the Darkness Light, 564 pages. And Chesapeake, 1,024 pages. I'm not sure if all the other books on the list strung together would have equaled the 1,600 pages I read that summer. Chesapeake alone covered a 400-year history, but I stuck it out. They were great books, both. I recommend them to you. The freshman year of high school, you learn how to map out a story. Not just beginning, middle, end, but also the exposition, setting the scene, the rising action, the conflict, the falling action, the complication, and the resolution, or my favorite word from that year, denouement. Denouement is a fabulous word from the French, meaning to unknot. Is that right, Natalie? Reading a great novel is as satisfying as untangling the Christmas lights when you finally unknot that crazy clump of wires out of the box. Of course, in these 2 epic novels, which my mother so nicely picked out for me, I had over and over again, sometimes to subsequent generations of the same family. Unlike a short story where there is just one conflict to overcome, one problem and one untangling, in an epic novel, as in life, there are many struggles, many complications, many resolutions. As I was also to learn that year in English class, and in many years as an English major later, the great works of fiction hold within them not just their own stories, but allusions to other great works. So our stories are constantly referring to other stories: history, Greek myths, folklore, poetic figures, religious themes. And almost all of the great classics contain references to the Bible, that other really long book. Growing up as a Unitarian Universalist, we didn't learn a lot of the stories from the Bible. We got the basic ones: Noah and the ark, Moses and the tablets, Jesus and the manger. But I wasn't steeped in those other stories and verses, as some of my classmates had been. And so I actually missed a lot of these references when I was reading. You who grew up in more traditional churches probably already noted in this morning's service all of our references to Ecclesiastes, right? There's a time for everything and a season for every purpose under heaven. You got that, right? And take Call the Darkness Light. That's a reference to Isaiah. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Beautiful lines. But what do they mean? These lines from Isaiah mean that in our own stories, we get to name what is light and what is darkness. We get to name our own virtues and faults, and the virtues and faults in others, and sometimes we get it wrong. Our lack of consideration for the feelings of others can be called certitude or confidence. Our brashness can be called courage. Our cowardice can be called caution. Our lack of generosity can be called thrift. Our complete lack of experience can be called being anti-establishment. When we make ourselves the heroes of our stories, it's interesting how all of our faults can be cast as our strengths. It is tempting to call the darkness light. So this happens all the time. It happens in elections. But there are also times, as in Sabra's time of the Industrial Revolution, when culture itself is changing. What is acceptable is changing. Women working outside the home, leaving their families for lives on their own in new factory towns. Abolitionists questioning the very basis of slavery. Labor movements calling for a 10-hour workday. Irish and German immigrants making a place for themselves in society. What once was true is not true anymore. Sabra's story in Call the Darkness Light takes place in a time where everything is being shaken up. The old truths are all being called into question, and people have very different viewpoints about what is light and what is darkness. As Sabra explores the world and learns other people's stories, stories she couldn't have imagined before, there is no longer such moral certitude. I am good. You are bad. This is my place. That is your place. No. It changes. Our lives map onto the sweeping epic of right into my rights as a woman, right into being paid a minimum wage, right into the assumption that America is a melting pot. I think about the people born at the turn of the century and the changes they must have seen in their lifetime. It's hard to comprehend. They were born without electricity in their homes and died looking at pictures of their great-grandchildren on a laptop. There's a woman in the news this week, Jerry Emmett. She's 102 and lives in Arizona. She was born before women could vote. She remembers the very first time her mother was allowed to cast a ballot and how joyous that was. And this week, she cast her ballot for a female president. Even in my own 36 years of life, I have seen changes. I think about gay marriage. That was not even on the horizon when I joined the Gay Straight Alliance at my high school that year after I read those incredibly long books. At that point, joining that club seemed like a risky thing to do. Socially, not physically. But the other night I learned the history of the Circle Club, an underground gay club in Switzerland in the 1950s. They had meetings and dances and a newsletter. Phil, you'll think this is funny. Their logo looked exactly like our flaming chalice. I have no doubt about it. But it was the top secret club. You needed a membership card to enter the events, and you didn't go into the doorway unless you were the only one in the dark alley. If there was someone nearby, you went around the block again. There's a great film about this called The Circle. I recommend it. The two men who are depicted in the film met at the Circle Club in their 20s. One was a teacher, and his job was threatened if anyone even suspected he was gay. The other one was arrested during a raid of the Circle Club. He was pressured to give up the names of all his friends. They are married now. One of them, the teacher, came out to his family at his 70th birthday party. Things change. Times of darkness turn into times of light. And sometimes, after a crisis is over and is followed by falling action, there is a complication before there can be a resolution, and it all begins over again. When we turn the clocks back, and all of a sudden the nights are dark so early, it makes me feel the heft and weight of the long winter before us. But when I map this season onto the arc of time, it feels short. Unlike some seasons of darkness in our lives, this one has a predetermined beginning and ending. We know just when the light will return. It's not so far away. Did you know that from the International Space Station, that astronauts witness 15 sunrises and 15 sunsets every day? It's true. The space station orbits about 200 miles above Earth, traveling 17,000 miles an hour. So it takes about 90 minutes to circle the Earth once. So every 45 minutes, the astronauts on board see a sunrise or a sunset. And oh, a space sunset is a spectacular sight. A space sunset shows in vivid detail the many layers of the Earth's atmosphere. The first layer displays the dark part of the Earth experiencing night. Above that, in deep orange and yellow, is the Earth's troposphere, which contains all of the clouds in the sky. then the pink to white region above the clouds gradually turns to a light blue band, the stratosphere. That's the part of the Earth's atmosphere where airplanes fly. The layer above the stratosphere appears as a dark blue band that gradually fades away into the cold, dark vacuum of outer space. Forget reading 400 years of history in Chesapeake. Nothing puts time into perspective like seeing it play out from outer space, dark to light, light to dark, every 45 minutes. A new day constantly dawning. While we're on the subject of space, if you see one astronomical event this year, make it the November supermoon. I mean, mark your calendars, the evening of November 14th. On this night, the moon will appear 14% bigger and 30% brighter than our usual moon. This is because the moon will be the closest to Earth that it's ever been in the 21st century, and it's a full moon. The full moon won't come this close to Earth again until November 2034. Do me a favor as you look up at the night sky on November 14th. Look at that gorgeous moon, that 30% brighter moon, and remember how small we are in relation to the Earth, to the sky, to the universe. Remember that life is a balance of light and darkness. Remember how light breaks into the darkness. Remember how your ancestors looked up into the night sky and saw the same moon, and how generations from now, children we won't ever even know will look up into that same sky, catch their breath at that same moon. What will their chapter of history look like, their piece of the long arc of history? We can only imagine. But we know that their lives too will be made up of light and darkness, hope and worry, struggle and joy. Is it possible then that there is a time to feel energetic and a time to feel drained in the rhythm of life? A time to let life and energy flow outward from you, and a time for it to flow inward. Maybe the ebb and flow of spirit is a rhythm that is good to feel. Maybe in our growing into wholeness, there is a time to feel dusty and dry, hard as iron like the winter ground, and stony as winter water. Maybe instead of worrying and suffering over those feelings, we could settle into them, knowing that there is a time for cold and a time for warmth, a time to be energetic and a time to rest, a time to grow and a time to stay where you are, a time for the light of reason and a time for other ways of knowing. Maybe we could walk in beauty and balance more easily if we could welcome the dark time, trusting that when it reaches its full strength, things will begin their tilt back in the other direction. Nothing stays the same in the flow of things. All things seek their balance and their rhythm. The wheel will always turn. turn. The light will always